The sky over the open fields looked wide and quiet, like a soft blanket of blue turning to gray. A thin wind moved through the dry grass, and the cattle made low, gentle sounds as they settled for the night. Thomas, the rancher, walked his last round with steady steps, checking the gates, the water trough, and the old barn doors he knew by heart. He did this every evening. It gave him peace. It told him everything was as it should be. Thomas was a man who liked simple things done well. He did not speak much, but when he did, people listened because he chose his words with care. He looked after his land with pride. He fixed what was broken and cleaned what was dusty. He fed his animals before he fed himself. He kept a small photo of his parents by the kitchen lamp. It reminded him of the values they taught. Keep your word, be fair, and help when someone needs a hand. He was turning to head back to the house when he heard it. A small voice, not loud, not clear, just a few words carried by the wind. He stopped and looked into the dark edge of the yard. The yard light left a bright circle on the gravel, but the rest of the night was full of long shadows. He heard it again. Please, help me. The words shook a little, as if the speaker was cold or afraid or both. Thomas's breath slowed. He did not rush. He spoke the way he would to a young colt. It's okay, he said softly. You're safe here. He took a few careful steps toward the sound, letting the gravel crunch under his boots, so the person would know he was coming and not be surprised. From the shadow of the old barn, a woman stepped into the light. She had dust on her feet and the hem of her dress. Her hair was pulled back, but a few strands had slipped loose and framed her face. Her eyes looked tired. She held her arms close to herself, as if to make her body smaller. She looked at Thomas with hope and fear mixed together. Please, she said again, I need help. Thomas nodded once in a calm way. All right, he said. Come inside. You can sit. You can drink water. No one will bother you. He offered his hand, palm open. She did not take it, but she walked with him. He kept his pace slow and even. His old dog, Rusty, stood at the porch stairs and wagged his tail once, then twice, as if he sensed the worry and wanted to ease it. Inside the kitchen, the air felt warm and safe. The lamp by the sink made a soft circle of light. Thomas pulled out a chair. Sit here, he said. He filled a clean glass with water and set it on the table. He found an old knit blanket draped over the back of another chair and placed it near her. She said thank you, in a voice that sounded both grateful and unsure. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and took slow sips of water. My name is Thomas, he said. This here is Rusty. He nodded at the dog, who lay down near the door like a quiet guard. You can tell me your name when you feel ready. No hurry. She looked at the glass, then at the floor. Emily, she said. That's a good name, Thomas replied. Emily, you're safe here tonight. She took another sip, held the glass with both hands to stop the slight tremble. I walked, she said after a moment. From down the road, she paused. From the place with the tall fence and the long drive. Thomas knew the place. Everyone did. People in town didn't say much about it. When they did, they kept their voices low and their sentences short. He never liked talk that ran on without facts, so he held his own thoughts close. But he had heard enough to know that worries around that place did not come from thin air. Is anyone following you? He asked gently. She shook her head. I don't think so. I kept to the side of the road. I stayed in the ditch when I heard engines. I just needed to be away. I needed a door that would open. Thomas let the words sit between them for a while. He turned to the stove and set a small pot of stew from earlier to warm. The kitchen filled with a simple, kind smell. Onion, carrot, a hint of thyme. He sliced bread and put butter on a plate. The dog watched with hopeful eyes, then put his head down again, as if to promise he would not ask for a bite. Eat a little, Thomas said when the stew was ready. Then we'll think about the next step. You don't have to decide everything at once, Emily nodded. She took a spoonful, then another. Color returned to her face a little at a time. After a few bites, she looked up and met his eyes for the first time. Thank you, she said. I didn't know where else to go. You did right to come, Thomas said. Some nights ask more of us than others. This one asked you to walk. The next one might ask you to speak. We'll do one thing at a time. Outside, the wind pressed against the window, then eased. The clock ticked on the wall. A truck passed far away on the highway, a low hum that rose and fell, then faded. Emily watched the small movements of the kitchen, the steam from the pot, the tiny swing of the clock's pendulum. The quiet seemed to sink into her shoulders and soften them. People where I was, they use strong words, she said at last, searching carefully for the right way to talk about it. They make people feel small. They make people feel like speaking is wrong. I started to forget my own voice. I thought maybe it was gone. Thomas listened without a single quick comment. He knew how to let a story come at its own pace. Sometimes, he said, a voice comes back in a place where it is invited. This is such a place, she nodded. I told myself I just needed to reach a kind door. Any kind door? She gave a small, shaky smile. Your light was on. It stays on, Thomas said. My father used to say, leave a light on the porch. Someone may need it even if you don't know who. He looked toward the photo on the shelf. He liked simple rules. They have carried me far. Emily's eyes followed his. She noticed the photo. The neat row of coffee mugs, the worn cutting board that had served years of meals. She also noticed little things that told their own story. A jacket hung on a peg near the back door, patched at the elbow. A map of county roads under a magnet, a jar filled with spare screws and nails. None of those things felt loud. They felt honest. I don't want to cause trouble, she said, hands still wrapped around the warm bowl. I don't want anyone to be hurt by my coming here. Kindness is not trouble, Thomas said. Truth is not trouble either, though sometimes people treat it that way. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we decide who to talk to and how. He stood and took the lantern from the hook by the door. I'll check the barn and make sure everything is closed up. You'll hear me step out and step back in. Rusty will stay. He likes company. The dog thumped his tail once in agreement. Thomas moved through the yard, the lantern throwing a steady circle ahead of him. He ran his hand along the fence rail, a habit more than a need, feeling the smooth places and the rough ones. He closed the small side gate the wind had nudged open. He paused, listening. The night held its usual sounds. A distant owl, the rustle of dry leaves, the soft shift of cattle in the pasture. He took one slow breath in and out, then returned to the house. When he came back, Emily was standing near the window looking out. I used to love horses, she said when he entered. When I was a kid, my neighbor had one. I would stand at the fence and wait for her to come close and sniff my hand. I liked the sound they make when they chew hay. It's calm. It tells you the world keeps going. You can meet mine in the morning, Thomas said. They like visitors with quiet hands. She smiled again, a little more this time. I used to braid a horse's mane in tiny sections and hum while I did it. Not a real song, just sounds. She touched the edge of the blanket, thinking. I haven't hummed in a long time. The kettle on the stove let out a short sigh as it cooled. The house settled, the way old houses do when they are content. Thomas set another log in the stove and watched the small flames take hold. There's a guest room down the hall, he said. Clean sheets. A quilt my mother made. I can leave the door open if you like, and I can leave a light on. You can also sit here as long as you want. No rush. Maybe a light, Emily said. Just for tonight. Of course. He grabbed a small lamp from a side table, turned the knob until the glow was low and kind, then placed it on the dresser in the guest room. The quilt had tiny squares of old shirts and dresses. Some were faded, some still bright. It looked like a map of years. The room smelled faintly of cedar and soap. Emily stood at the doorway. It's pretty, she said. It looks like someone cared about time. They did, Thomas said. And we still do. Back in the kitchen, he wrote a few names on a notepad. The clinic nurse who always listened. The pastor who spoke softly and kept promises. The woman at the diner who knew everyone but never told more than she should. These were people he trusted. People who understood that sometimes the first help is a cup of coffee and a steady chair. He stepped out onto the porch for a moment. The yard light hummed. Overhead, the stars were bright and patient. He thought about the town, about how people could be friendly at the store and quiet about hard matters. He thought of how silence can feel like safety, but sometimes it keeps good people from being heard. He looked at the road, a thin line that went right past his gate and onto places he could not see. Morning came slowly, like a soft curtain pulling back from the fields. Thomas poured coffee and set a cup on the table for Emily. She entered the kitchen quietly, her hair brushed back, the blanket neatly folded over her arm. She looked rested but careful. He could see her measuring the day, deciding where her words would go and which to keep. He nodded to her in a simple way, letting her know the house still held the same promise as the night before: safety, care, and time. They ate warm toast with a little honey. The kitchen smelled like coffee and fresh air from the open window. Beyond the porch, the sky was pale, and the horses stood near the fence, their ears forward, patient. Emily watched them for a moment as she buttered her toast. She seemed to breathe easier while she watched. The quiet sound of a horse chewing carried through the window and made her smile once. The small kind that visits a face and then hides again. Thomas took note of it in his mind, a good sign, and changed nothing about the room. When they finished, he wiped the table with a damp cloth. "Today," he said gently, "we talk to people who listen. We start small and steady." He handed her a short list with first names and a few notes. "This is the nurse at the clinic. She keeps things private and cares about people. This is the pastor. He helps folk tell their stories in their own time. This is the diner owner who knows everyone and always treats people fair. No gossip, only help." Emily read the names and took a breath that felt like a step forward. "Okay," she said. "I can do this. I want to do this." The words came out soft but sure, like a string pulled tight enough to hold a weight without breaking. They started at the clinic. The nurse, a calm woman with kind eyes, led them into a small room with a window, a plant on the sill, and a chair that didn't squeak. She offered tea and spoke slowly, leaving space after every sentence. Emily told her part of the story, not everything, just enough to be known. She described long days under constant pressure, rules that made people small, and a pattern of fear that settled like dust on the skin. She said that when small concerns were raised, they were brushed aside, and when bigger concerns were named, they were lost in quiet halls. The nurse listened and took notes the way a gardener waters soil, gently but with purpose. She didn't push. When the story paused, she let it pause. At the end, the nurse gave Emily a few options. There were forms for safe reports, numbers to call, and a promise to document what was said. "You get to choose the pace," she said. "You are not alone. We move one careful step at a time." She also offered a simple checkup, not because of any one event, but because long worry can sit in the body and make it tired. Emily agreed. The checkup ended with a little bag, a small bottle of lotion for dry hands, a lip balm, and a card with direct lines to people who help. It was a small gesture, but it said, "Someone is thinking of your day beyond this room." From the clinic, they walked to the diner. The bell above the door chimed, and the owner, a clear-eyed woman with a quick smile, greeted them like old friends. She slid 2 menus across the counter and, without asking, placed 2 glasses of water on the table. She had a way of keeping the room gentle. She did not hover. She did not stare. She moved as if leading a quiet dance, giving privacy while staying close enough to steady a chair if needed. After ordering eggs and toast, Thomas mentioned they were speaking to people who could help. The owner nodded once. "Good," she said, her voice calm. "You keep going. If you need a quiet table for a talk, you can always have it here." Word moves in small towns like wind through grass, soft and in every direction. Thomas knew this. He also knew that unkind talk can bloom fast if it is not guided by steady hands, so he kept the purpose clear: to support, to document, and to find people who care about truth without turning it into a show. The next stop was the pastor. He welcomed them into a simple office with wood shelves and a pot of tea. He listened as Emily told more of her story, piece by piece. He did not ask for details she didn't offer. He asked only about what would help her feel safe, who she trusted, who had listened in the past, and what kind of outcome she hoped for. "The truth can be kind," he said, "because it allows healing. We will aim for the kind truth." By late morning, there was a small circle forming: the nurse, the pastor, the diner owner, and Thomas. Each agreed to help with the next steps: a written account stored in a safe place, a contact at the county office who handled fair treatment issues, and a plan for how to speak without causing harm to anyone who meant well. No one wanted anger to lead the way. They wanted clarity to lead. They wanted care to walk beside it. In the afternoon, the county office returned a call. A staff member named Maria spoke with a steady voice and named the paths forward. "We have a way to receive what you share," she said. "We also have a way to protect your name if needed. There are others who have tried to speak in the past. We keep careful records. If you choose to tell your story, it can help us see a pattern we can address." Her words felt like a handrail. Emily held to them, feeling the structure of a staircase under her feet. That night, back at the ranch, Emily stood in the yard with Rusty at her side. The air was cool and smelled like grass and hay. She told Thomas she was ready to write her account. They sat at the kitchen table. She described what she had seen. Not scenes of harm to describe in detail, but the wider shape of a place where fear lived. She wrote about unreasonable schedules, confusing rules that changed without notice, talk that made people doubt themselves, and the way some people felt their concerns would never matter. She wrote about how this shaped everyday life, how people walked carefully, spoke in small voices, and lost sleep. She wrote in simple sentences. She did not use harsh words. She used clear ones. When she finished, she read it aloud. Her voice shook twice and then steadied. Thomas sat still and let the words fill the room. They sent the account to Maria at the county office. They also shared it with the nurse and the pastor, so that 3 trusted places held the same truth. The next morning, Maria called. She thanked Emily and said, "Your words match other concerns we've heard. Thank you for adding your voice. It helps us do our work with care." She asked for permission to bring in a trained listener to take a more complete statement. "At your pace," she added. Emily said yes. Days passed, and the rhythm of the ranch gave their minds a steady beat. Emily fed the horses, brushed their coats, and found herself humming again. She braided a mane in soft lines that looked like a small river. She picked tomatoes from the garden and lined them up on the sill to ripen. Thomas watched the way small tasks seemed to return a sense of being rooted. At night, they drank tea on the porch and watched the light reach across the yard. They didn't talk about heavy things every moment. They talked about clouds and birds and the way wind changes at sunset. This, too, was part of healing, letting the world be ordinary again. In the second week, a reporter from the local paper reached out. She had a careful reputation. She wrote stories that made people feel seen without turning them into a show. Maria had given her only the most basic notice, that concerns had been filed about a workplace in the county and that the office was reviewing them. The reporter met with Emily and Thomas on the porch. She turned off her recorder more than once to make sure every step felt right. "We can publish without names," she said. "We can also hold the story until the county is ready to share its plan. You get to choose." Emily looked at Thomas and then at the reporter. "I want the story to help," she said, "not to harm. People there are kind in many ways. They just live under too much pressure and too much quiet. I want the air to feel lighter." The reporter wrote a gentle article about the importance of listening when people raise concerns, about how a town shows its values by how it handles quiet, honest comments. She did not point fingers. She did not name places. She quoted the pastor on healing and the nurse on care. She ended with a line about porch lights and open doors. When the article ran, people read it over coffee and in the school parking lot. It opened careful conversations. It let those who felt small lift their heads a little, and those who had not noticed begin to look around with kinder eyes. At the county office, Maria and her team followed their process. They met with workers in private rooms. They offered translation where needed. They explained rights and options. They spoke in plain language. They asked simple questions. They took small breaks when voices wavered. They did not hurry. When a concern was named, they asked, "What would better look like?" This question did something important. It turned each worry into a path forward. The answers were practical. Clearer schedules, fair rest time, a safe way to speak up, and a promise that no one would be treated unkindly for asking for help.